La Bufa is the guide for our journey. Lifting the sight, the way seems to be endless, climbing through devious breach and thick vegetation through the mountains of Sierra Madre Occidental. Imposing twilights, numerous streamlets, and the chanting of the birds encourage us to go up further, drawing our adventure among pinnacles and thick fog. Our effort will be rewarded. The goal: a small hidden town among mountains and clouds, almost on top of heaven. San Sebastián del Oeste. San Sebastián del Oeste is an old mining town located in the west region of the state of Jalisco. Its isolation from the daily world has protected its architectural patrimony, which is an example of the most representative of Real de Minas, and it preserves testimonies of the colonial epoch. The National Institute of Anthropology and History has promoted an initiative that has placed San Sebastián del Oeste on the indicative list in the preliminary stage in order to be officially named World Heritage by UNESCO. Framed by the Sierra Madre Occidental, San Sebastián fits in a perfect harmony with its fabulous natural surroundings. Mountains with wood pine trees, evergreen oaks and pinabetes protect in its entrails a wild diversity of flora and fauna. Some species are endemic and they are not found in other places of the world. The Botanic Institute of the University of Guadalajara impelled a proposal to declare Sierra de San Sebastián as a federal biosphere reserve. For its artistic and historic value, its urban and architectural patrimony, as well as its natural richness, for the Secretary of Culture of the Government of the State of Jalisco, it's one of the highest priorities: the preservation, research, and the publishing of this site. The ambition for metals like gold and silver drew the Spanish conquerors to the region. In 1524, Hernán Cortés' nephew, Francisco Cortés de San Buenaventura, conquered this place. In 1542, the streaks were discovered and the ACMA started by the exploitation of the mines of the ancient town of Ostotipac. In the year of 1605, the town was founded with the name of El Real y Minas de San Sebastián, turning into one of the most principal mining centers of the New Spain. In the same year, El Real de los Reyes y El Real de Resurrección were founded. El Real de Resurrección was at the beginning the most important one, and it was head of jurisdiction. The mines of the region were exploited until the year of 1690, since by the year of 1699, the people of the town were very poor. In 1777, El Real de Resurrección, Minas de Ostotipac were getting opaque, and the name of San Sebastián began to be heard everywhere, placing its name on a jurisdiction map. It was between 1774 and 1779 that the streets were traced of the present municipal head, traces that have remained most intact since the 18th century up to date. Works continue on small scale, freely, until the year of 1864. In 1865, the extraction gets great importance, but not in a free form, because the mines should be reported to the corresponding authority. In 1880, the export quality metal, unbrewed stone, was taken on mules to the train station of San Marcos. By this period of time, the main mining centers were La Quiteria, Los Reyes, and El Tajo Mining Company. Each one of these has its own benefit hacienda. The mining company of Jalisco property of the Escandons family, owners of La Quiteria, was one of the most important ones, and they sold the business to the Englishman Lonergan, who sold it as well to the North American José Buell. In 1904, José Buell was the first one to take advantage of the use of water as a motive power, since the mining centers would conduct the water from the streams nearby to these aqueducts, making waterfalls strong enough to move the mortars and the small mills where they crushed the metals, and later they would send it to the benefit hacienda. In mining terms, benefit means to extract the useful substances from a mine and then set them through a metallurgic treatment. The benefit haciendas would have some furnaces to found the metals like gold and silver. Later on, it was sent already purified on mules to the same train station, San Marcos. In 1906, La Quiteria got a cylindrical mill capable to crush 500 tons every 24 hours. When the people from El Tajo mining saw the apogee of La Quiteria, they ordered to bring another mill like that one. In 1910, the Revolution War was the beginning of the end of the mining in San Sebastián. The period of time of Porfirio Díaz in the government would give great warranties to the mine owners who controlled the minerals of the region. After the Revolution War, without the government's protection, the robberies increased, the mines were closed, and many of the inhabitants of San Sebastián lost their jobs and immigrated to the towns nearby, to the big cities, and others to the United States, fact that ended the old mining tradition which lasted for over 300 years. At present, San Sebastián has hundreds of mines. Most of them are lost and closed up. Some of them can be still visited, like Santa Gertrudis, La Terronera, La Quiteria, and a lot more. The name San Sebastián is taken from the saint of the town, where its celebration is held on January 20th. Later on, the town was called San Sebastián Décimo Cantón because of the territory division of the region. Changing this, it was called Exdécimo Cantón. Finally, it was substituted by San Sebastián del Oeste because the city council asked for it in 1983. The municipal head. The small town of San Sebastián del Oeste has scarcely 600 inhabitants. People cultivate on their orchards coffee, bananas, limes, oranges, eggplants, papayas, pomegranates, and guavas. They also dedicate themselves to cattle raising, farm animals, trees felling, coffee processing, and they make preserved food like cajeta. There are people who work for education. They have elementary school, middle school, and high school. Other people make their living out of commerce, and recently, tourist activity has been increasing. On the orchards, the coffee trees stand out since almost all of them produce their own coffee. They dry it up from the sun on their patios, on the terraces, or even on the street. At the entrance of San Sebastián, by the neighborhood called La Pareja, framed by enormous ash trees, we find the property La Quinta. Here is where coffee is processed and sold. The neighbors go to see the owner, Rafael, to toast it and crush it. The product is organic since no chemical substance or pesticide is used through the cultivation and processing. Rafael's mother, Doña Mari, was born on January 20th, 1920, and she's the oldest woman of the place. She's the great-grandmother of the town and has 66 grandchildren, 26 great-grandchildren, and 4 great-great-grandchildren. Everyone loves and admires her for the strength and the feeling like living she has. The inhabitants of San Sebastián del Oeste live without any hurries and any winces, preserving its culture and tradition. Talking to them is an enriching experience when you listen to stories, anecdotes, and legends. Doña Pachita is a store clerk of El Nuevo Mundo, which was the first tienda de raya. Here, she is known as the poet of San Sebastián.
Oh instantes venturosos dormid, no canséis con sollozos mi mente ya cansada. Callad por un momento sus voces que son garras, que me hieren muy dentro como filosa daga.
Lyric. With no formal studies in that subject, Pachita writes with her heart and with the experience that life has given to her. Pachita has published some books. Cheerful and without complications, she declaims her verses and poems to everyone who asks for them. Conchita is a descendant of the founders of San Sebastián. Her house is one of the oldest ones and it is full of story. With the personal objects she inherited from her ancestors, she made a museum in one of the rooms of her house. She receives guests from all over the world, and with many of them, she's still in contact. Her talking is agreeable and enriching for her knowledge of the region history. Immersed in the mountains of Sierra Madre Occidental, the surface of the town council is rough, with heights in between 200 and 2,520 meters over the sea level. San Sebastián is located in a tropical zone and the predominant climate is humid. The woods are formed by pine trees, oaks, capomos, avilla, parota, ash trees, masahuite and pochote. In the valuable mesophilous woods of mountains, plants from the tropical zone and the temperate zone live together. The habitat has a very rich biodiversity, described by the experts as one of the best preserves due to the relative isolation. In the town council is found one of the highest mountains of Jalisco, mountain where La Bufa is located, a rock formation located at 200-500 meters over the sea level, from where you can admire the towns nearby. A ride on a horse to climb up the mountain of La Bufa is a marvelous experience, among trees and mountains, like if we flew to heaven. In the colonial epoch, La Bufa helped the now of China Marines as a signal to get to the seaport of Acapulco. One of the greatest treasures of San Sebastián is its vernacular architecture. The house's design corresponds more to the necessities of its inhabitants than to an architectural style in particular, although a Hispanic influence is perceived. The houses, white most of them, and with a maroon border, owe their color to the traditional lime process, very old method of painting based on lime. Its thick and rustic walls, some of them covered, some others not, are formed by brick of clay and ocote pine that are hard and exposed to air, material best known as adobe. The doors are made of wood, framed with quarry stone, and some of them have a wooden crossbar on top. The roofs are sliding roofs made of red clay tile. In the inner part, the walls are high and the windows are long, with wooden doors, and in some cases they have iron work protections. Thick timbers hold the tejamanil, a characteristic ceiling composed by thin wooden boards. In the outer part, beautiful terraces that are typical in the town, with their columns, low walls, and oriented towards the street. Locally, they are known as corridors, and they present a peculiar design distinctive of San Sebastián and the mining towns of the region, which is a relation between the public space and the private one, motivating the social relation of the family with friends and neighbors. The streets, with its irregular traces, its swerves and alleyways, as well as the different levels of the houses, give also its own stamp to the place. La Plaza is the heart of the town, with its kiosk, surrounded by big houses made of adobe, long halls with their columns, and a spectacular landscape of wooded mountains. A curious detail is the different levels that respond to a curious tradition, where on holidays, women with honor would walk around the main hall of the plaza, and around the hall below, women with no honor. On the corner was located Lavanderia, Cantina, where friends get together to drink raicilla, which is a traditional liquor made in San Sebastián. The Church of San Sebastián, neoclassical popular style, date from 1608 and has suffered several modifications. The tower, with its octagonal belfry, was added in 1884, as it is engraved on the rear part of it. The inside is beautifully adorned and includes images of several saints. Near the plaza, you can find El Pabellón Mexicano, where in its facade you can see a sign that can still be read even though it has become blurred. Pablo Encarnación, born in 1844, ordered to build El Pabellón, which was his house, where he lived with his family. On the corner, he had a store and he would storage a lot of merchandise. From here, they supplied all the council town until the coast. There was a phone communicated with La Hacienda Jalisco, and from here to the mine called Los Cuates. He was a very important miner who led the mines of Los Reyes, San Sebastián, Porvenir, and La Quiteria. Pablo Encarnación was known as the father of the poor people since he would help all the needy ones. Brave, he chased the indigenous of Losada until he exterminated them, and he built the fort El Pabellón to fight the indigenous from Zapotlán, Nayarit, and some others that came to steal. On the top front of El Pabellón, we found the fortress, where armed people protect themselves and defended the town, leaning out their rifles through these holes, shooting against the invaders. He also ordered to build the fort of the church, which would offer a great perspective of the plaza. On the rear part of El Pabellón, he built El Fortín, which is composed by this tower and these walls made of adobe that present several orifices to point to the aggressors who would came from the south. The tower had two shooting levels. Some would place themselves on the ground level and others lifted up on some timbers. Pablo Encarnación died drowned in 1889 in the Chapala Lake when the steamboat Libertad would follow the song's waltz rhythm over the waves. This waltz was prohibited in San Sebastián for a long time. At present, El Pabellón is a hotel. Where the store was, a guest room was made and the doors turned into windows. San Sebastián has nowadays several mine or benefit ex-haciendas. The Hacienda Jalisco would benefit the metals of a number of mines like La Quiteria, La Terronera, and Los Cuates. At the present time, it was transformed into a posada, and the rooms still preserve, when possible, a formal environment. Lately, one part of the hacienda was open as a museum. The ground floor is rectangular and it has two levels. Through a long space, there are some corridors formed by 6 arcs on its rear facade. The lateral facade shows 2 vertical windows that end with a triangular front wall. In the patio, this wheel is preserved, which was part of the mill where they crushed the metals, as well as a furnace where they founded gold and silver. In a period of time, the hacienda turned into a favorite refugee for characters like John Huston and Elizabeth Taylor, who enjoy the privacy and beauty of the hacienda. The hacienda is located among the bottom of several mountains, from which stand El Capulín. For this, you can appreciate a spectacular landscape. By the side, the San Sebastián stream passes by, which is a part of the hydrological basin of Ameca River. There are other haciendas nearby like San Jose, from where you can see at the end La Bufa Mountain and remains of its mining past. In this town property, a new section was added, which does not preserve the original style. At La Galera, it is also possible to appreciate some ruins where they transformed the metals. At the Ex Hacienda del Cura, there is an aqueduct and its waterfall. Besides its mortars, they crush the products of the mines with enormous stones impelled by the force of San Sebastián stream. The old cemetery shows centenarians' tombs, which are the reminders of what it was an ancient cemetery that dates from the amendment laws. The tombs show beautiful architectural details, and the inscriptions send us to distant times. It is worthwhile to preserve this beautiful cemetery for its historical value. At the entrance of San Sebastián, you can find the Plaza de Toros, which tells us about the fondness of the town to the bullfight fiesta. A little bit farther, the neighborhood La Pareja receives us. Name taken from the horse races they had over there. We also see some very old and huge ash trees that frame the entrance of the town. The neighborhood, El Rey Dormido, takes its denomination from a town property that had a small palace painted and outside a sleeping king. This town property was a cantina and then a grocery store. The flavor at San Sebastián delights our taste with typical gastronomy, tasty Mexican traditional food and fresh drinks. Pozole, birria, enchiladas de mole, tamales, and as dessert, cajeta. In San Sebastián, you have dinner in a rustic environment, surrounded by the majesty of the mountain range. A typical drink of the region is called raicilla, an organic origin drink. It is made of agave lechuguilla, which habitat is the western mountain range of Jalisco. San Sebastián is one of the origin council towns of this drink of Jalisco. Almost 400 years of history of this mining town have filled up each place with myths and legends that are part of the enchantment of San Sebastián. According to people, several spirits guard hidden treasures in old town properties and strange places. These spirits ask for religious commitments, masses, or weird entrust to the fortune seekers as an exchange for the buried valuable treasures. The total and consciously resting that we have always dreamed of can only be obtained in a few places around the world. Sleeping in San Sebastián is a whole experience where sleep is profound, restoring with nothing that interrupts it. The historical and natural richness of San Sebastián is drawing the attention to visitors, and the access routes are through Mascota or Puerto Vallarta. You can get there by car, on horse, or by light airplane. At present, it is on process the construction of a road that will get together Mascota with San Sebastián and San Sebastián with Puerto Vallarta, which will increase the flow of tourism to this region. In spite of the inherent economical benefits that progress would bring, the inhabitants of San Sebastián are worried about the preservation of their traditions and architecture, besides the peacefulness itself. For the neighbors, tourism must be conceived as responsible visitors, respectful of the culture, of the patrimony, and the town traditions. They have to know how to appreciate its beauty and enjoy the peaceful place. For the preservation of the town's properties, nature, and culture of San Sebastián, it is necessary to do and to implement a normative in order to be respected by the visitors as well as the neighbors of the town. One of the matters to talk about is the modification of the houses, where it must be preserved the style and original materials. This enchanting mining town, lost in the middle of the mountain range, offers the visitors a total different kind of resting. In addition, we'd get closer to the real Mexico, the ancient one, with its traditions and the colonial architecture preserved through generations. San Sebastián is a place to explore, but overall, a magic space that allows us to rediscover ourselves as human beings on a corner where architecture is in perfect harmony with the surrounding nature. The landscapes, the mountains, the rivers, the twilights, and the open-air activity get in contact with our senses, making us feel more alive than ever before. La bufa es guía para nuestro recorrido. Alzando la vista, el camino parece interminable. Pero al final, escalando a través de tortuosas brechas y espesa vegetación por las montañas de la Sierra Madre Occidental. Imponentes atardeceres, numerosos riachuelos y los cantos de las aves nos animan para ir aún más arriba, sorteando nuestra aventura entre cumbres y una espesa neblina. Nuestro esfuerzo será recompensado. La meta, un pequeño pueblo escondido entre cerros y nubes, casi en la cima del cielo. San Sebastián del Oeste. San Sebastián del Oeste es un antiguo pueblo minero